part 2, second part. Guess I pressed a little bit by mistake the stop sign. We got that backpack. We were just discussing geopolitics, you know. That is my special interest, and that is what I know. Heat wave, August 1st, second part. This is the second part of the video. The first video kind of I flipped. I was trying to put my glasses away, sunglasses away, and kind of the camera flipped, and here we are still marching towards the sunset in the second part of the Imperial March for our Empire of the 63. Pledge your allegiance, legions to our family. And got that backpack. In the backpack, you know, I got those corn. Got that corn. Thank you, farmers, butchers, bakers, truckers on the road, firefighters. Always marching steps for the workers, the plumbers, the electricians, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, always thinking, meditating around the 63, the 10, the 50, and the 3. Fellow Canadians, the king is absent. Beautiful sunset, heat wave. I never saw on my phone app for the weather. It said 35 degrees. I never saw 35 degrees. I think we might have broken the record today, August 11th, the second day of the full moon. And in that backpack, I got some of that corn, which I'm going to boil either tomorrow if it's less. Tomorrow still continues the heat wave, but I think it's going to be for Wednesday. So we're going to boil some corn for me and my anonymous friend, because it's been a while, you know, so better eat some of that good corn this summer. And thank you for those who donated. Always good for those who make an effort to donate for food security. And you know myself, I'm just financially stressed. Besides financial stress, I'm joyous now. You know, when I work out, train, exercise, I always get that joy. Although financially stressed, I'm gonna say my gratitude, grateful, thankful. My rent's paid, electricity bills paid my phone bill, the trinity of bills, 3 bills paid, hydroelectric bill paid my rent. It's August 11th, and paid my electricity bill, phone bill, and rent. Trinity of bills, I got about $44.90 to last me until the end of the month. So that's gonna be only spending a little bit on that food, you know, because I limit myself to some food. And I got some wafers, and actually I ran out of wafers, but I still got some sweets at home. Got a chocolate bar, so that's gonna be eaten once my workout is complete done. And that's why I got auctioning this for $1 million. For $1 million, to give half, of course, to my anonymous friend. And that's all we got, and that's all we do for the loving. And that's how we're gonna auction this for $1 million, $1 million to give half, 50%. This has to be auctioned for $1 million to give half, 50% to my anonymous friend. And that's how we gotta get doing with that, half 50-50, and auctioning the underwear, the pants, the socks with it, and I guess the hat. But this I got secondhand a few years ago. I think I paid $6, maybe $6 or $5 or $4.50. In between $4 and $7 I paid for this shirt. Secondhand. Most of what I got is actually secondhand or donated, gifted, because you know I moved from that moldy underground place. It was like a tight prison cell. It wasn't really a prison cell. I always say it was like a small, it was a really small underground basement. Like the kitchen was in the room, so I didn't really have a kitchen. And the bathroom was so small, smaller than prison cells, I guess. I served my time, but I moved there. I thought it was 2016. It ends up it was 2015, so 10 years ago. And you know, my memory goes a little bit on that blackout since my life prior to spring 2014 remains a mystery. But here I am, joyous, financially stressed, and always encourage all to work out, train, exercise. And working out, training, exercising has been, is, and will continue to be my medicine and therapy of choice. And I love to see my fellow cousins and brothers and sisters who do a little bit of that, working out, whether biking, and it's a heat wave, so always a little bit of that extra encouragement since it's a heat wave and it's hot. Heat wave is the 5th day, I guess, today. We've been having some good heat waves this summer. We were hit hard, and to be honest, I don't mind it at all. I just hydrated a full bottle of 700 ml of water, but I don't mind it personally, to be honest, not at all. I'm gonna salute the train conductors, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the farmers, the electricians, Hydro-Quebec workers, and this independent artist, athlete, philosopher, geopolitical theoretical analyst, theorist, thinker, and strategist, always putting on for the marching steps for the 63, the 10, the 50, and the 3. And as a matter of fact, you know that I do have a condition called Asperger's. I discussed this in part 1. I'm not going to delve into it now because I'm going to go straight into geopolitics, because that's where the second part, this is the second part of my August 11th Imperial March special event is going, and I was discussing geopolitics. So leave the baggage at the door. Geopolitics is my special interest, and of course it's geopolitics 24/7, and it's geopolitics for the 63, the 10, the 50, and the 3, and the political sphere, which we have to get doing, always interpolating and always encouraging all to work out, try and exercise. And that is what we have to do today, and that is what we're gonna do today, and that is what we're gonna do tomorrow, in the appellation, of course, of all our interdependencies of what we are and where we are situated in the sphere of our position. That I have to make the statement, which is true, that I predicted what's happening now back in 2019. In October, November, I predicted what's happening now back in 2019, in October, November. October, November 2019, I predicted what's happening now. Yeah, you heard that correct. I even have the proof, you know. I predicted what's happening now back in 2019. In October, November, I predicted that there's going to be an international conflagration based on several parameters of an analysis, somewhat intellectual, academic, and rigorous in certain regards. And I guess sometimes you just gotta get it for now, and you just gotta understand this reality, and I have proof for it, and that the world has changed in the past years, you know, quite drastically. And all my imperfections, my Asperger's, and forget being androgynous, pansexual, you know, part of the LGBTQ community. When we discuss geopolitics, you have to discuss, we're discussing geopolitics now. And I am an independent geopolitical theoretical analyst, theorist, thinker, and strategist. So when it comes to, I was discussing my statement, which one has to accord my statement has to be accorded in the positive, of course, that is in the affirmative with a yes. And this statement is that for us Canadians, and vice versa for my brothers and sisters in the USA, when it comes to foreign affairs, so I'm not discussing domestic, internal affairs. So I'm not discussing domestic affairs. I'm discussing in external affairs, right? For us, when it comes to external affairs, the number one priority which we have to attribute, which we have to consider, the number one priority which we have to consider, of course, is not that we have to consider, but the number one priority which we have to, of course, relegate, is, of course, the fact that we, as Canadians, Quebecers, we have to, of course, attribute that we have, of course, our main interest is to have the best, most cordial economic, financial, commercial, sports, social, cultural, mutual defense benefit relations with the United States, right? That is a yes. You cannot argue with that. That is not a statement which one can argue with, right? That is not a statement which is negotiable. That is just like the pi symbol. It's a letter N with two heads, two-headed, two-faced N. The N letter for Normandy, neutral, natural, neurodivergent. So of course, that is just the reality, the truth. You cannot say no to that. You cannot be negated. In other words, one cannot negate that fact. One cannot negate that fact. So you have to say yes, 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 yes to it. So our interest when it comes to foreign affairs, our number one priority, that is for us to have the best, most cordial economic, social, financial relations with the United States, and the United States towards us to have the best, most cordial relations with us. That is just, of course, the relations which, of course, have to be accorded with that. So that is just the yes of the whole. It's not even a theory. You understand? It's a principle. It's a constant. Just like the constant mathematical, just like the constant mathematical representation when it comes to the N. The N letter represents, of course, the relation. Of course, the relation between the relation between the relations between the circumference, the circumference of the circumference, of course, the circumference of the circle, So that is always the same. That is always the same. So the circumference of the circle is always P. It's always P. It's always P. It's always P, which is the N, two-headed N. That's why our empire, coming empire, will have two faces, two heads. So the N always represents 3.1416. That is just a constant. It cannot be changed, It cannot be changed. It cannot be changed. So that is, of course, always a constant. Always a constant. Always a constant, It's always so. Always a constant. So that doesn't change, It doesn't change. So that variable, that constant, is always the same. It doesn't change. It doesn't fluctuate. Right? Because it's a number. Mathematical constant. Mathematical constant. So thus, as a primary interest, as a primary interest, our primary interest when it comes to foreign affairs, so don't think about domestic internal affairs, it is to have the best, most economic, financial, cordial, economic, financial, military relations with each other. With each other. Economic, social, dynamic, commercial relations with each other. That is just the main directive. That is not so that you cannot say no to that. You cannot negotiate that. It's always same. It's always the same. That you cannot say no to, So you cannot negotiate with that fact. That is just what it is. It's something which is like the pi symbol, It's like the pi symbol. So the pi symbol, of course, always represents this dynamic. Always represents this dynamic, the relation to the circumference and the ratio of the circle, Of the circle, which is 3.1416, That always is the same. Always is the same. Always is the same. It is not a variable. It is a constant. Thus, my statement that for us, in reciprocity, and it is so for the United States vis-a-vis us, that the United States must work towards the best, most economic, friendly, diplomatic, military, defense, social, cultural relations vis-a-vis us, Canada, and us vis-a-vis the United States. So that is the constant foreign affairs principle. And that must be our first, that is actually our priority, top number one priority when it comes to foreign affairs. When it comes to foreign affairs, not domestic internal affairs. And this is also from our perspective and from the United States perspective. Of course, because we have two oceans, the Pacific to the west, the Atlantic to the east. That is just the reality. And of course, our social, cultural, historical history, joint history, common historical development as a new North American collective civilizational complex, our common destiny and future. Our common destiny and future. That is just what we have to do. That is just what we have to do. So that's why, of course, we have to consequently, of course, prudently be for the coming of our empire, the fusion of the 10, the 50, and the 3. Of the 10, the 50, and the 3. Always for the 63. That's why my way to fuse Canada in the United States best. Best. So once again, the declaration which I made is a constant, at least has been so for the past 75 years, ever since the dissolution of the British Empire, ever since the dissolution of the British Empire, right? At least since the dissolution of the British Empire. You see they got 4. And you can get a little bit of fish here. So it has been so for the past 75 years. It is so now. And it will be so at least for many, many decades. Many, many decades to come. Right? So that is just the constant. So that is just the constant which we have to strive to align, whether you're on the right, on the left, in the center, or in the center right, or in the center left. So that must be aligned. 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 So you cannot be, you cannot be so. That is so. That is so. That is so. That is just the reality. You cannot negotiate with that. It was so in the past, it is so today, and will be so for the coming, I guess, until we establish a world federation like in the fifth element. I see an N.A.C.W.P trait. We might be overly concerned about that detail of the number of the bus number, meaning 44 is 006, the 44 and the 006. So here I got a few seconds. Because see, that's not the number of the bus. The number of the bus is 195, but that's a general number, which doesn't change. Why the 195, the bus number can actually change. What does not change is the number on the bus, per se. So it's always something which I meditate upon. Gotta salute, send some love to the public transit workers, bus drivers, electricians, the plumbers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, the firefighters. You bet we're gonna go check a little bit of that there. Check a little bit of that there. Their public workers made a good job to embellish the public cities, and we need to embellish and beautify the public spaces as much as we can, and it's something, of course, which we have to do. So once again, our main interest, of course, it is to have the best, most cordial economic, social, financial relations with each other. Oh, the spider's going up. Time to go up, I guess. I've been rock bottom. I see 4 spiders. All the 4 spiders are going up. 1, 2, 3, 4. You saw? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The big ones. They're all going up. Good omen, I guess. God is blessed as I will to build the Forgotten Goddess geodds temple. You heard that correct. I am somebody who wills to build a Forgotten Goddess temple, and wow, what a beauty. Gonna commend. Isn't this super nice? I just love it. Good job, public workers who did this beautiful garden. So beautiful. Look at that. Just makes me smile, quadruples my smile, and this is really nice. Wow. This is 4 thumbs up for this one. Look at that beauty. Wow, I just love it. So nice. Just quadruples my smile, and the red and the yellow, super nice. If you don't have a big garden like I do, this is a great one. I have a little bit to put a little bit in front of my place, but I appreciate it. But this, I really appreciate this beautification here of the public sphere. That's really nice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I gotta give some shout out, to the public workers, because they did it with that, and they did it with some brains, and they did it with some muscle, and some labor, some work, and we get to appreciate it there. What a nice, one of the best. Of course, it's small flowers, but they're so vivid. The flowers are so vivid and alive, that's how we got with that. And that is that they're so vivid, the flowers, and they're so alive, almost like fluorescent, They have that fluorescent vibrancy about them. Certain fluorescent vibrancy, if you notice, they're really nice. So it's something which I guess you get to think about as you are, of course, in the public sphere, and takes some work. So anybody want to commission, finance the public spaces embellishments, the public spaces, embellishing the public spaces, that's something which we have to. I could do a geopolitical work, geopolitical analysis of the need for embellish our public spaces, of which we have many here. I live in Montreal, H-A-W-K, that Hawk Island, Montreal Island of the Hawk. My totem bird, the H-A-W-K, Hawk, and got a cat there. And the heat wave stretching, got some food, I guess. There in the corner, somebody put a little bit of food out. We got several cats. Here, they look like twins. Kind of look twin-like, but whatever the case may be. So back to geopolitics. Again, the statement is, this is external foreign affairs, not internal domestic affairs. Internal domestic affairs is, of course, that our main economic, financial, commercial interest. Economic, financial, defense-wise, security-wise, commercial, social, cultural interests for Canada, and in reciprocity, that is for both Canada vis-a-vis the United States and the United States vis-a-vis Canada. Our main interest is to have the best, most cordial economic relations with the United States. That is what it is with that, and that's what we have to get doing on that drill with that, and that's what we have to get doing on that love. So that is something which we have to get doing for the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, the firefighters, and all those involved in the production, distribution of food. That's what we have to get doing with them. So that is something which you have to understand fully, and consequently, of course, when we get it, to get it on the drill and get it on the go. So that is something which is always so. A constant, mathematical constant. It is always so. It's always so. You cannot negotiate it away. You cannot argue it away. It's a constant, just like the pi symbol is a constant. It represents, of course, the ratio between the circumference, the diameter ratio with the circumference of the circle, That is just the reality. So just like that is a mathematical reality, a constant, if you will, so is, of course, my thesis. But it's not just, so don't think of it as my thesis or my theory. It's not really a thesis, it's not really a theory, but it's just how it is, It's just how it is, just how it is. So it's not necessarily that it's mine in any way, shape, or form. It's with specificity, or specifically mine in terms of being of my own private affairs, or that it is basically a private matter. It's not a private matter. It's not a matter of interpretation. It's not a matter of argumentation either. For us, the North American Collective, that is just what it is. That is just what it is. You cannot argue it away, right? And you cannot change it because it's a constant again. So the difference between a constant and a variable, it's always the same. So think of, again, that's why I make the parallel. It's the mathematical parallel, right? Because the pi symbol doesn't change. It's always 3.1416. So it's always continuous. So that's why I make the comparison to think of my statement in terms of the pi symbol, which represents the numerical value and the relation between the aforementioned relation between the pi symbol, mathematical pi constant, and of course my statement, which has to do with geopolitics. Because just like that N, which represents the symbol representing the pi number, is a double-headed, two-headed, two-faced N. So thus our coming empire, fusing Canada, United States, will have this kind of two-faced, two-headed Imperial, one Republican, one Democrat, if you will, one Imperial Republican aspect, the fusion of the 63, that is. So that's why for us, Quebecers, Canadians, our main interest is to have the best, most cordial relations with the United States. Again, that is just because of our history and of our common destiny, right? So that's why my way to fuse Canada and United States best. So that is not something which you can argue with, which you can of course say, and which you can of course categorize, you know. So it's a constant. Just like the pi symbol is a constant. It's not something which fluctuates, right? That is just what it is. So whether you want, or we know we have certain feelings, emotions, and I'm far from somebody who would have voted Trump since 2018. I have been and will continue to challenge Trump to a boxing match because Granddaddy Trump made the mistake to impose tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel. But we're discussing geopolitics here. So just from a geopolitical perspective, just like here in Quebec, we made the great linguistic compromise to have peace and continue to have peace. But you have to make an effort. If I don't make an effort, if you don't make an effort, it takes my individual responsibility to make an effort, right? That's why I always offer, if anybody wants, I always offer French. If you want French lessons, I'll volunteer. You don't even have to pay me. I'll teach you French just because. But I have to make the offer. If I don't make the effort, then the individual effort is not conclusive to the collective, right? So it's always an individual effort and a collective. It's always an individual effort and a collective. It takes both, of course, to tango, if you will. It takes both elements for one to tango in relations. So it takes both the individual and the collective. It takes both the collective and the individual. So that is just the reality of the aforementioned. On the other side, you got the South Shore. And on the other side there, that's the South Shore there. So you got the South Shore. If you're interested, you can go on the South Shore there. Have a little fun with that and just go on the other side if you so will. But whatever the case may be, we're just gonna drive it in and continue to drive it. And now I'm gonna take another route, and we're gonna go to that side a bit and go a little bit further and then come back, not too further away because I want to get back. I don't want to do a long one, but that's just something which I got to do a little bit on that and do a consequential, of course, with our definite arenas which we have and arenas which we have to play, interplay, and of course in the great collective North American civilizational complex of which we are together and which we are now and which we are to live with and which we are to establish ourselves as a civilizational complex which is not totally divorced but is distinct from Western civilization. So that is something which is part of my, of course, geopolitical, if you will. It's not a theory again, it's a reality, it's a geopolitical reality, right? It's not something that it's theoretical. It's just how it is. So that's why the best way to explain it, or to make that parallel synthesis, is by the pi symbol, which is that two-headed N, that two-headed N, two-faced N, of course, which has to be, of course, conclusive and has to be, of course, done in such a way to be explained fully what it is and fully how we interject it in our coming and our developing further strategies from that principle. Everything vis-a-vis how to solve and how to move forward between Canada and the United States, everything has to be in reciprocity thereafter. Everything has to be based from that number one foreign policy objective. Because again, in the number one spot, our number one interest when it comes to foreign affairs is to have the best, most cordial social, economic, financial and military relations with the United States. And the United States vis-a-vis us, that is of course the same relations, which of course has to be accorded and has to be principled, right? Has to be principled and outlined. So that is just how it is, That is just how it is. You cannot negotiate with that. You cannot negotiate, So it's not negotiable. You cannot negotiate that statement. That, of course, is not a fantasy, is not a belief, it's a reality. That our main interest, of course, us, when it comes to the United States, we have to have the best, most cordial relations with our brothers and sisters in the United States, and of course the United States vis-a-vis us. That is just what it is. That is just how we have to be doing with that. So that is where we have to state. All our statements thereafter have to be placed in concordium from that. So thus we can move forward once we have, of course, said yes to that. All our leaders, from the left, from the right. What is that? I wonder if that still works. Maybe. When was that built? When was that built? I passed by it several times, but I'm not sure, of course. Gotta check it out. Actually, I think now we're gonna turn back slowly, because I guess it's time. Wow. Wow. See, yeah, it took a lot of wheat. Gotta salute the wheat producers. Think about it, the bread, it's with the growing prices. So again, just like I said, that our main interest has to be, of course, for us to be towards moving to have the best, most cordial economic, social, financial relations with each other. That is just the reality. That is just the reality, right? That is just the reality. That is just the reality. You saw a big fish jump. That is just the reality. So you cannot argue with that again. You have to say yes, 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 yes. Otherwise, we're not discussing geopolitics, What is our main interest? As Quebecers, Canadians, Quebecers. And that's just my brothers and sisters in the USA. When it comes, not domestic affair, when it comes to external affairs, it is to have the best, most cordial economic, social relations, military, defense-wise with each other. Both for the United States towards Canada and the Canada towards the United States. This has been so for decades, and it is so today, as I say, I got that Canada tatted up, and don't know, of course, don't know when I got that tatted up. Must have been decades ago, because my memory is on that rah, but that's what it is with that, and that's how we can move forward. How we can move forward when you say yes to that. When you say yes to that. So once we have said yes to that, then we can move forward. So now again back to 2019 when I predicted what's happening now. So I predicted what's happening now back in 2019. I predicted that there's going to be an international conflagration on the horizon back in 2019. October, November. To be specifically, it was actually October 2017, if I'm to get a precise date, precise date. So the precise date, of course, is around October 2019. So that is something which you have to, of course, see there's a boat there. So that is something which you have to, of course, implement in your head, integrate in everything that you're gonna see, that you're gonna see, and that you're gonna hear from now on, hear from now on. So everything has to move in concordium to the next, of course, step. How do we solve the current economic tensions and geopolitical tensions and contributions with each other? How, of course, we can move forward. These are 4 nice benches. So in order to fully understand and fully grasp the dynamics of my prediction, I predicted it based on several more academic, intellectual, cosmopolitan academic, cosmopolitan dictums, of course, more cosmopolitan and academic dictums. But one of those dictums, if you will, was that due to the fact, or principles, was due to the fact that many unresolved conflicts from the 20th century still lingered and, of course, still happened to be unresolved in the 20th century. Right, in the 20th century. And for the most part, if you look at the conflicts that are happening around the world, Russia-Ukraine is a conflict which dates from the Cold War, which lasted between March 1947, and ended December 1991. So almost 45 years. The Cold War lasted more than 44 years and 9 months, almost 45. Some even say more than 45 years, going even to say 46 plus more than 46 years. I usually place the Cold War between March 1947 and end of December 1991, thus almost 45 years, not quite 45 years, but I'm willing to compromise a little bit. Right, but that's as a geopolitical thinker, strategist, that's how I term the Cold War. But there's no consensus, just like there's no consensus in what causes Asperger's. That makes me especially engaged, super focused, super intense when I discuss geopolitics, right? Just when I study geopolitics, that one makes me super engaged, super focused. That is, of course, just my special interest. And paradoxically, I guess, to the curse of Asperger's, due to, of course, being my special interest, of course, I have predicted what's happening now back in October 2019, and even I have the proof, because I have, of course, the online proof dating from 2019, from October, November 2019. From October, November 2019. From October, November 2019. From October, November 2019. Right? From October, November 2019. So just like, of course, that point in time made it so in the confluence of course, the internal dynamics of the affairs, of course, that we have to, of course, appellate and, of course, integrate in all the abilities which we have, of course, to fully understand and fully know and fully, of course, think in terms of how we move forward now, especially that we constitute a collective North American civilization, that our interests lie coast to coast, ocean to ocean, our geography makes it so, and our common historical destiny, and of course all ALL will come to join us here in our coming empire of the 63, because we constitute a collective civilizational complex which is not totally divorced, but is distinct from Western civilization. So how we move forward from that, that is just how we have to move forward in the appellation, of course, of the theorizing of the protocols which we have to implement as a mass public-private partnership, which is my dream, constitutes a mass call for a mass public-private partnership across what I call the collective North America civilizational complex, the collective North America civilizational complex, of which we constitute now the North American civilizational complex in the ideation, of course, of all the things which we have to endeavor ourselves to be on the left, on the right, and in the middle, and on the side, and of course in all our geopolitical and geospherical political appellations where we are united. And thus, our unity must begin with fully understanding and fully grasping the statement that I just made, that for us, Canada vis-a-vis United States vis-a-vis Canada, it is our main interest to have the best, most cordial economic, social, financial, diplomatic, and environmental, mutually beneficial relations with each other. That is just a fact. That doesn't change. That is just a fact. So of course, to that fact that doesn't change, of course, that is just the fact. So that is just our main interest, and then we can proceed from that. But that has to be fully accorded. So once you say yes to that, then we can move forward, right? Because if you don't say yes, or you say maybe, and then we're not. There's the impasse, and we're not into real geopolitics. Again, our reality, the geography, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, east to the west. To the west we got the Pacific Ocean. To the east we got the Atlantic. That is just what makes it so. So that is not negotiable. Other things might be negotiable, but not that. Right? That is just the reality. That's just the reality. So to understand fully that we now have to move all our politicians, again, whether you're on the right, on the left, in the center right or center left, not the extremes far right or far left here, then we can move forward with the understanding that we constitute a North American civilizational collective. And now the world order, which has been established for decades, I guess at least since 1978, with the opening of China by Deng Xiaoping, and the development of special economic zones, and parallel later the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. So for decades and decades and decades, has ended a few during COVID now, I guess, in the past 3.5 years. So consequently, and in appellation, of course, to all the things which we do, which we have to do, and which we continue to do, we have to move from that side. We have to move from that perspective. That is just how we have to roll with it. That is a nice green one. What a nice green. I wish I could give my anonymous friend this. Ride this Volkswagen Golf. I wish I could buy her one like exactly this car. I would buy her this Golf right here. Green Golf. For my anonymous friend, that would be nice. Me, I'm driving these military grade boots, auctioning them for $1 million. Give half 50% to my anonymous friend and buy a little bit of that. So just understanding fully the position, understanding fully the position, the consequential position, of course, of all our victims, where they are and where they stay and where we implement them consequently, and all our dynamics. That is just something which we have to do. Right? That is just something which we have to do. That is fusing Canada by my Trinity of theories. Because the world has changed. It has become more dangerous, and the order which we knew for the past decades has ended quite abruptly. Quite abruptly, you know. Quite abruptly. Quite abruptly. Quite abruptly, you know. Quite abruptly, you know. So it has ended quite abruptly. And I predicted it back in 2019 with all the imperfections, the scars, the retrograde amnesia, the survived COVID, survived being attacked by surprise viciously, the vicious surprise attack, and years and years and years ago, still have to go to the Jewish General Hospital to retrieve the archives. Still have to retrieve the archives from the Jewish General Hospital, and I guess it's gonna be working on that. Have to go, and this is the problem. A little bit of a problem with Aspis is that due to our routine, which we have this ritual-like routines, myself included, and we neglect other things. So that's where some support is required for Aspis. That is where some support is required for Aspis. That is where some support is required for Aspis, you know. That is where some support is required for Aspis. So that is just how we have to understand our geopolitical realities for the North American Collective. And of course, the North American Collective, aka the North American Civilizational Complex, also includes Mexico and Haiti, Cuba. Cuba is a paradox because they're still socialist communists, but North America includes Haiti, Dominican Republic, of course Cuba, and of course all the other ones, and all the other ones, and all, of course, the other ones, which of course are to do and have to do with their civilizational complex, of which we have, of course, and we interact with on a daily basis, of course, as part of the North America Collective, which we have to, of course, implement in all our standings as a macro, and the macro level, because an individual sovereign citizen now, myself, I have added duties and responsibilities in the public, which I don't have under the normal circumstances of life. If I would have stayed home, I would have not had the same duties, obligations, and responsibilities as, of course, when I go out. They're not the same. Right now, of course, they're not the same because they're added. I have added on or extra responsibilities, duties, and obligations, which, of course, under the normal circumstances of life, I don't have, right? So now they're added. Internally, they're added. Externally, they're also part of the responsibilities and the rights, also rights, but they're tempered or balanced by duties and obligations in the public sphere. So my rights are also now balanced with duties and obligations vis-a-vis the public sphere and vis-a-vis other individual sovereign citizens. So that is just something which we have to fully understand and fully reciprocate. Myself as a sovereign individual citizen with this neurodivergent condition, Asperger's, and you the 99.56%. We always got to build bridges together. Small bridges, medium bridges, extra large bridges, or large bridges. Within those four categories, I guess, just like when you order a cup of coffee or some fries, those apply, or they can apply integrally or more or less at a given point depending on the circumstantial and other factorials included. So now I'm going to discuss the DRT, the debt refusion theory. The DRT, the debt refusion theory. Super important for you to focus on this specific theory because it is the solution to the major problems, and it's part of course of the bipolar geopolitical strategy for total BDD, benevolent dominance and dominion of the world by fusing Canada and the United States into the Imperial Republican Perpetual Union complex. So that more academic, intellectual, philosophical words of aside, basically, and again, bipolar not to be confused with the psychiatric condition, but it's a bipolar, as of course in the bipolar strategy, geopolitical strategy. So it has nothing to do with bipolarity as in the psychological, psychiatric sense. It has everything to do with the bipolar as in this geopolitical constituency in a geopolitical manner for geopolitics vis-a-vis geopolitics, vis-a-vis geopolitics, vis-a-vis the world of geopolitics. So that is, of course, something which has to be concluded, which has to be, of course, internalized, and of course, which has to be fully understood in many ways, shapes, or forms, which, of course, the understanding has to proceed from the further evaluation of where we are today in the coming of our democratic Imperial Republic and the constituency of where we are today as a complex, as a interior complex for the contour, of course, of where we are in the relations with each other. So, of course, that is just the dictums where we are and the dictums where we have to further attribute and further consolidate. So the premise and the beginning that you have to affirm is that we have to have the best, most cordial relations with each other. Economic, social, military, defense, social, cultural, financial, etc., 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 etc. Now today we are faced, and this is where my DRT, the debt refusion theory, comes in. One of my Trinity of theories. The DRT is known as the debt refusion theory, parallel to the CIT, the citizen integration theory, and the DFT, the democratic fusion theory, part of the Trinity of theories, along with the other philosophies, social cultural philosophies, which are mostly North American centric, because my centrism is North American collective prone, and of course the dictums, of course, which we have to appellate and conjugate and to create these two complementary public-private partnership integrated Canada-United States joint public-private partnership institutions. And of course, can I now discuss the DRT, debt refusion theory. In my DRT, the debt refusion theory integrates what's called monetary integration theory, and monetary integration theory is the financial theory which was implemented in the European Union in the 90s. In the 90s by the Europeans who, in the 90s, they created the ECB, the Germans, the Italians, the French, the Belgium, many countries. They destroyed their national central bank in the 90s along with their currency, and they created a multinational banking institution, the ECB, the European Central Bank, which issues a common currency for many nations and countries and states, right? The European Central Bank is not, the Germany, Italy, France, Belgium, many other countries, they no longer have national central banks. They have a multinational central bank. So in my debt refusion theory, in my debt DRT theory, which we have to implement, starts with me today, the discussion of it. In my DRT theory is integrated that financial theory known as the MIT monetary integration theory, which the Europeans implemented more than 25 years ago, in the 90s. It started before, but in theory it started in the 50s, but they gradually implemented until the 90s. They finally created the ECB, the European Central Bank, to issue the euro, the common currency for many countries now. So they no longer have national central banks, as we have here the Bank of Canada, the US, the Federal Reserve, and other countries, Bank of China and Bank of Israel, etc., etc., etc. They have a multinational central bank. So we're gonna, in my DRT theory, is included that theory, but it's for the realities of today, of August 11, 2025. So we have 4 main problems that are pressing the majority of the population, both in the United States and in Canada. Both in the United States and in Canada. And these 4 main problems are: one, in whatever order you place them, those are the 4. In whatever order you place them, those are the 4. One of the problems is stagnation of the salaries. The salaries are stagnating. The other one, and again, for different individual sovereign citizens, they can place it in different orders. The other one is the growing cost of living. The prices of bacon, of eggs, of bread, of butter are increasing. Milk, etc., etc., etc. My wafers went from $1 to $1.39 now, and the chocolate bar I used to buy 3.5 years ago. I bought it for, it was $1. Now it's $1.98, so double. It was 99 cents, and now it's double. It doubled in 3.5 years. First, it went from $1 to $1.17, then from $1.17 to $1.49. Now finally it's $1.98. So it doubled in 3.5 years with 3 different price increases. So it's increased every day, every week. Prices of something somewhere across North America are increasing, and they keep going up. That's the problem. The growing cost of rents as well. My rent went up, but I can't complain, because for me, I find it to be fair in my case. I was just gonna say that my rent went up between $6 and $10. Between 6 minimum and 10 maximum. Between 6 and 10. Between 6 and 10. Between $6 and $10, right? So if my rent went up between 6 and 10, between 6 and 10, that is of course just how my rent went up. Between whatever the case may be, which is 6 and 10. $6 minimum and $10 maximum. So between 6 and 10, you know. I'm not gonna say if it's 6 or if it's 10 or if it's in between. Minimum 6 for me or maximum 10. So it went up, but I can't complain. So maybe it was 6, maybe it was 10, maybe it was somewhere in between. Either or, cannot complain for me. So the cost of living, growing cost of rents. The 4th one, or in whatever order you place it, even the growing cost of the debts, credit card debts, and of course, the credit card debt, of course, is something which we have. The credit card debts, of course. The credit card debt is something which we have to be transmissive of. The credit card debt is something which we have to be, right? The credit card debt is something which we have to be complimentary about. That's what it is, and that's where we go. So, of course, the credit card debts, even sometimes now, that's what it is, that's what we got. The credit card debt is something which we have to compliment. And so the credit card debt is something which we have. But the credit card debt, right? Even now, somebody in Montreal to San Francisco is swiping their credit cards. Montreal to San Francisco, they're swiping their credit cards. In Montreal, Hakala, Montreal, somebody's buying with the credit card. So the growing credit card debt, indebtedness. So there's a growing credit card indebtedness. Growing credit card debt. Growing credit card debts. So these 4, in whatever order necessary, whatever order, you know, whatever order you want to place them. Whether you place them in whatever order for you or for an individual, they are placed in different orders and different dynamics. So in whatever order you might place them or somebody else might place them, it of course something which you have to attribute to. So the attributions for the individual sovereign citizen, that these are 4 pressing economic problems in whatever order. Again, the 4 are the growing cost of living via the prices increasing every day and week, growing rents are increasing, the stagnation of the salaries, and the growing credit card debt. The credit cards are going up, right? The credit cards are going up. The credit cards are going up. Yeah, people are swiping. For both Canada and the United States, these four apply. The credit cards are being swiped, credit card debt increases. So these four. Now the DRT is the solution or something similar. Something similar is the DRT. The debt refusion theory is something similar. The debt refusion theory integrates monetary integration theory. Inside the DRT, the debt refusion theory is integrated monetary integration theory. The monetary integration theory, of course, is integrated in the DRT, in the debt refusion theory. Inside the DRT, the debt refusion theory. The debt refusion theory. The DRT, the debt refusion theory. Inside the DRT is integrated monetary integration theory. So listen carefully. So again, it is the solution, if not something which resembles fundamentally, in essence, in the principles, financial, economic, commercial principles of my debt refusion theory, the DRT, which is the solution. So we're gonna take all the public and the private debt. All the public and the private debt. My $10,000, your $10,000. Coast to coast, ocean to ocean. My $10,000, your $10,000, their $10,000. All the debt, the public and the private debt, the public and the private debt, the public and the private debt. So my $10,000, your $10,000. All the public and the private debt, including my $10,000, we're gonna, of course, take all the public and the private debt. All the public and the private debt. All the public and the private debt, we're of course gonna take it all together. All the public and the private debt. All the public and the private debt. All the public and the private debt, we're gonna convert it into US dollars. We're gonna convert it into US dollars. All that public and that private debt, we're gonna convert it into US dollars. We're gonna add it with the US dollars. So we're gonna add it with the US dollars. All the public and the private debt. All that money is gonna be the initial money for a new central bank. The initial money for a new central bank. The initial money for a new central bank. All that public and private debt is gonna be added coast to coast, ocean to ocean, including my $10,000. All the public private debt of Canada, including my $10,000, because I don't have credit cards myself. I do not own credit cards. I have a debt to the RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, on the credit line. And we're going to convert it into US dollars and add it with the US dollars. And all that public private debt with all the money that is in the circulation, we're going to create a new central bank, the Imperial Republican Central Bank. We're going to create a new currency based on the value of the US dollar, the UE. U dot universal E dot exchange U dot UE, the UE U dot universal E dot exchange U dot UE, the universal exchange unit, the universal exchange unit, the universal exchange unit, the UE U dot universal E dot exchange U dot UE, the UE, the UE, the UE, U dot universal E dot exchange U dot UE, U dot universal E dot exchange U dot unit, the universal exchange unit, the UE. UE, U dot universal E dot exchange U dot unit, the UE is gonna have the value of the dollar. We're gonna set an interest rate level of 10%. It could be 10%, not less. I mean less, not more. So correction. The 10% is gonna be the maximum allowed, so it's gonna be a new financial realities, new financial order. It's gonna be only 10%. We will not allow more than 10% after that. not allowed. It could be below 10%. It could be 7%, 8%, 9%, 3.33%, 1.56%, 4.18%, 7.18%, 9.18%, 9.3%, whatever the case may be, 1.1, 3.16, 4.18, 5%, 6.1, 7.7, 9.3, etc. So it's going to be 10%, 10%. So that is, of course, maximum, which is going to be, with that money, we're going to, of course, rebuild the North American infrastructure. We're going to rebuild the bridges, the tunnels. We're going to build those 44, mass construct 44 underground subterranean city tunnels, mass cities with tunnels-like structure, basically city tunnels. 44 across Canada, United States joints. We're going to get rid of the border. In case of a thermonuclear war, we got to start to build those 44 mass tunnel complexes. In case of a thermonuclear war, it might start today. We see nuclear saber rattling, which of course can happen, and of course it can happen, of course, and that's all we got, and that's all we gotta get drilling with that, and that's all we go, man, and that's all we gotta get that rock and roll for that, and gotta get it for those who are left, right, and center, and in the middle. Sometimes it's just those things which we have to do, man, and it takes building those 44 tunnels together, and it's gonna take implementation of my DRT, the debt fusion theory. It's a must. It's a must. It's a must. It's a must. It's some things which we have to do to implement it. It starts with me discussing it today, and with the implementation of the DRT, that is via the DRT and the creation of the UE. We're gonna also mass finance citizens to work out. Build those 44 tunnels in case of a thermonuclear war. Build those 44 and build the 44 mass tunnel city structures in case of a thermonuclear war, so that citizens can survive in case of a thermonuclear war. We're gonna mass finance citizens' fitness. We're gonna get rid of the border, the Canadian-US border. We're gonna fuse in the perpetual Imperial Republic Union, the 63, into 63 super states, super provincial states. The 63, we're gonna create a common passport. We're gonna create a common passport, make a census, a grand imperial census, to see everybody who's been living here since 7 years, give some amnesty. Even the North American Criminal Rehabilitation Act has to be incorporated, and give some amnesty. See, of course, who wants to, of course, do a little bit of that drill and build those 44 tunnels, and see, of course, if they have to build those tunnels, if they want to build those tunnels, to see, of course, if they do want to build those tunnels. And the implementation, of course, of building those tunnels is something which we have to relegate, and we have to discuss, and we have to do the building thereof of the complexes together in this coming of our imperial fusion together. That's what we have to do, and that's what we're gonna build it, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna build this democratic imperial republic by fusing the 63. We're gonna, of course, create this new super imperial structure. We're gonna create the super integrated, citizen integrated, the Imperial Integrated Dance League, aka the Dancing Goddess Army, to dance for the environment. And of course, we're going to create the Imperial SSD Legion, and we're going to fuse the RCMP here is like the FBI Federal Police Force with the FBI to create the Imperial Republic Police Force. The Imperial Republic Police Force, the IRPF, or the IRF, Imperial Republic Police, the Imperial Republic's Police, or the Republican Imperial Police, the Imperial Republic Police Force, the Imperial Republic Police Force, by merging the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Mounties, the RCMP, and the FBI. We're going to get rid of that border, make this great census, and see who can be accorded a little bit of amnesty. Amnesty. give some amnesty, of course, to those who have been, of course, incarcerated at different levels, and see who has been living here in the past 7 years, 5 years, 7 years, 5 or 7 years, to see who we can give some amnesty. Of course, if they had 44 convictions, criminals convictions since 2014, so I guess more than 4 times a year, that would be something which we could not give second, third, fourth chances, because when you're up to that point, I guess, is something which you have to conclude, of course, in the conclusion that we are for us to do in the situational aspects where we are, and the situational aspects where we engage ourselves to be, and in the situational aspects where we engage ourselves not to be, and of course where we constitute a collective civilizational complex force, and or of course we keep on going, and we keep on going on the left and on the right and in the middle, and it's something which we have to be doing like that, and something which we have to appellate, of course, in the construction of our coming imperial forces for our collective North American civilization. First, gotta salute the first responders, firefighters, ambulance drivers. When you hear the firefighter sounding the alarm, or the ambulance drivers or the police, just slow down your car, drive slowly, because you never know, you never know. Sometimes you need, of course, to just slow down a bit and be mindful about that. Slow down and be mindful to just drive a little less fast. Drive a little less fast. This is something, I guess, which could be understanding about, and which we have to fully understand each other, for the complementarity of where we are and where we do and where we love and where we go and where we are in this life, in the imperial life. And now we're gonna switch to that French, because we liable Privee, and so we have to appellate, and we have to constitute, and we have to revise, and we have to really implement, and we really have to, of course, get going with the building of the 44 tunnels in case of a thermonuclear war. That is something which we have to, of course, meditate about, and make sure we make this great new Imperial Republic's Constitution Act together, as we solidify our coming Imperial perplex, and as we solidify our coming Imperial Republican perplexities, and reconcile this democratic republic of our empire. Goddess kiss, God bless it, Goddess kiss it, God bless our coming empire, and Goddess kiss our legions, the legions, the SSD legions, Dragon Army, pledge your allegiance, legions. We're going to create the Dragon Army and the Dancing Goddess Army. And now we're going to switch a little bit of that French, because we la belle province. Grateful, thankful, my rent's paid, electricity bills paid, always working independently in geopolitics, rock and roll, fitness, sports, and we can need to mass finance citizens' activity and build the North American People's Imperial Coliseum on the Canadian-US border, where me and Donald Trump are going to fight. It's going to be 11 times bigger than where the Super Bowl 47, aka Hardball Ball, aka Blackout Ball, when my 49ers lost, where it was played. And we're going to build the Forgotten Goddess Temple, the Pyramid House of the Dragon, and the Rainbow People's Palace for my fellow neurodivergent community, for the Empire, for our kingdom, for our democratic Republicans. Support a dream, Adrian Hannah Dragon, keep my name out of your mouth if it's not for a blessing. Hope you have an understanding. Big kisses, big hugs, big loving for the sanitation workers, butchers, bakers, nurses, firefighters, plumbers, truckers, electricians. Et bienvenue. On est sur la marche québécois et québécoise. Je vous encourage à faire l'entraînement physique. C'est la canicule. J'ai jamais vu ça sur mon cellulaire. C'est la première fois que je viens de voir aujourd'hui avant que je parte. Il faisait 35 degrés. 35 degrés, c'est la canicule. Je ne sais pas si on a brisé un record, là, mais c'est possible. Puis demain, ça continue, ça va être pareil. Puis je pense que juste mercredi, il va y avoir de la pluie, puis ça va baisser un peu. Moi, ça me dérange pas personnellement. Tant que je suis hydraté, je suis correct. C'est juste que j'ai jamais vu ça avant un 35. J'ai vu 31, 32, tu sais, mais un 35, il me semble que j'ai sur mon cellulaire, en tout cas, j'ai jamais vu ça. C'est la première fois que je l'ai. C'est sûr que ça fait juste un couple de mois que je l'ai, là, mais c'est sûr que c'est un nouveau appareil, outil de travail, là, que je fais mes vidéos avec cet outil de travail. C'est le téléphone intelligent, mais honnêtement, j'ai jamais vu 35 avant. C'était la première fois que j'ai regardé, puis j'ai pesé dessus, puis je dis wow, c'est peut-être un record, là. Puis c'est sûr qu'avec l'humidité puis le facteur de chaleur, c'était peut-être plus que 35. Bon, je vous encourage à faire de l'entraînement physique. Moi-même, je suis parti un couple d'heures de chez nous pour faire cet entraînement physique. Dans mon sac à dos, j'ai du maïs, du blé d'Inde, du maïs, du blé d'Inde. J'utilise les deux. Les camionneurs, travailleurs de l'Hydro-Québec, les infirmières, les bouchers dans les boucheries, les travailleurs de l'Hydro-Québec, les pompiers, tous les travailleurs du Collectif de l'Amérique du Nord, du Québec, du Canada, des États-Unis, des 63. Votre aspi, artiste, athlète, philosophe qui danse le plus. Vous savez que la danse, je peux en danser pendant des heures tel que j'en compose des chansons de rock and roll au quotidien, des paroles des chansons du rock and roll au quotidien, du rock and roll au quotidien, rock and roll 24 sur 24, la géopolitique 24 sur 24. L'entraînement physique, je le fais souvent au quotidien depuis que je suis sorti de ma dépression en 2017. Vous savez que j'ai vécu une dépression, puis j'étais vraiment suicidaire dans la dépression pendant un couple d'années. C'est sûr que moi, c'est plus différent là, vis-à-vis que je suis neurodivergent. Je fais partie de cette petite communauté de citoyens et citoyennes qui vivent avec l'Asperger's, l'autisme hautement fonctionnel. Donc, il y a certaines choses que nous, on a de la misère, de la difficulté à cause de ces mutations dans notre cerveau au niveau microscopique. Là. C'est au niveau tellement petit, micro, là, comme des micropuces, c'est comme des transistors. C'est sûr que c'est pas visible sur le crâne, mais c'est à l'intérieur du cerveau. Fait qu'à cause de ces mutations, nous, on voit le monde différemment. Fait qu'en voyant le monde différemment, c'est sûr qu'on a tendance, bien sûr, on a certaines tendances et caractéristiques qui sont différentes. Fait qu'à cause de ces différences, on peut souffrir dans bien des choses de la vie du quotidien parce qu'on n'est pas si bon dans la compréhension sociale, l'interaction sociale, comment on interagit au niveau du social. Nous, on a de la misère. Fait qu'à cause de ces difficultés, nous, on est différents. Fait que cette différence est quand même visible vis-à-vis vous, la majorité des citoyens et citoyennes. Vous êtes les 99,56%. Donc, quand vous constituez une grosse majorité de citoyens et citoyennes de 99,56%, c'est sûr que nous, les ASPI, ma communauté, on est moins d'1%, moins de la moitié d'un pourcentage. On est situé à 0,44. Fait que même pas la moitié d'un pourcentage. Fait qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup d'Asperger's dans le monde, c'est juste pour vous dire ça là. Puis encore une fois, c'est pas une maladie. Juste la semaine passée, puis là, 2 semaines, souvent, je corrige les citoyens parce que ils disent souvent c'est une maladie. Puis non, c'est pas une maladie dans le sens que c'est une maladie mentale ou comme d'autres maladies. Non. Je dois corriger souvent. Même la semaine passée, j'ai corrigé un citoyen. Je ne sais pas s'il était citoyen ou non, mais on a eu une discussion dans un supermarché. Puis je suis allé pour le dire parce que je me suis rendu compte que je me suis approché tellement proche à 2-3 pouces. Fait que ça, c'est une caractéristique d'Asperger. Tu sais, je fais référence à l'espace personnel de 2-3 pieds là, qu'on doit garder entre les gens quand on discute de 2-3 pieds. Mais nous, les Aspi, les Aspergers, ça ne rentre pas ces choses-là, sont difficiles pour nous. Tu sais, les normes non écrites de la société, des fois, il y a bien, comme ça disait, un chapitre dans le livre que je dois remercier mon ami anonyme pour m'avoir prêté 4 fois de la bibliothèque. Après, en anglais, c'est Appreciating Asperger Syndrome, soit apprécier le syndrome de l'Asperger. Apprécier le syndrome de l'Asperger, c'est un livre qui m'a fait apprendre beaucoup sur moi-même, tu sais, parce que ça m'a ouvert les yeux vis-à-vis à comment que je peux être vulnérable dans certaines circonstances. Cette vulnérabilité peut se manifester d'une autre manière que je ne me rends même pas compte de ces vulnérabilités-là vis-à-vis à certains citoyens, citoyennes neurotypiques. Fait que ça m'a ouvert les yeux à ça aussi. Ça fait que je dois remercier ça, parce que à mon ami anonyme qui m'avait prêté ce livre-là. Puis ça m'a fait beaucoup l'apprentissage de moi-même, parce que ça faisait bien des années, comme l'avait dit, diagnostiqué indépendant, des travailleurs de la santé aussi, qui m'avaient dit, ben, vous savez que vous avez l'Asperger. Vous savez que t'es Aspi, t'as l'Asperger, t'es sur le spectre de l'autisme. Fait que j'ai jamais voulu accepter parce que c'est comme un stigme, tu sais. Juste finalement, il y a 3 ans et demi, ben oui, c'est clair que je suis Asperger, je suis différent, j'ai cette condition de neurodivergence que ça me fait que certaines choses, on a de la misère, mais on est bon dans certaines choses, surtout quand ça vient à nos intérêts spéciaux. Ces intérêts spéciaux, ça préoccupe la plupart de notre quotidien. On a une routine rituelle qui peut être quand même, ça peut répétitif, tu sais, ça peut être tellement, on peut être tellement engagé, tellement concentré, super intense, super dedans quand on, je vais dire travail, là, parce que moi j'ai fait bien du travail indépendant dans la géopolitique. C'est mon intérêt spécial vis-à-vis, bien sûr, le rock'n'roll puis le sport, l'entraînement physique que je préfère moi-même. C'est la danse, même si j'aime le football américain, la boxe, le hockey, puis tous les autres sports généralement. Si c'est de l'entraînement physique, c'est sûr que je suis dedans, parce que j'ai perdu moi-même entre 80 et 93 livres depuis que j'ai commencé à faire l'entraînement physique en 2017. Puis c'est sûr que j'en fais au quotidien, comme je fais mes vidéos depuis des années. Puis en faisant partie de cette communauté de neurodivergents, je fais partie aussi de la communauté de LGBTQ, mais je suis androgyne, pansexuel, vous savez, je me cache pas, mais je me considère androgyne, monsieur, madame, monsieur, c'est pas quelque chose que... Puis ça fait plus que 7 ans que je suis ouvert, même c'est sûr que ça, c'est à cause de mes réincarnations. J'ai un côté spirituel, là, mystique, spirituel, mais c'est sûr que j'ai pas toutes les réponses. Hein. Demandez pas moi trop de questions, je vais vous chanter du rock'n'roll, puis ça va être peut-être un peu comique, mes réponses rock'n'roll, parce que je dis Dieu, déesse, les étoiles, puis que ça soit, mais à part ça, c'est sûr que je sais pas, tu sais. J'ai pas toutes les réponses. J'ai vécu comme femme, comme homme dans les vies antérieures. Ici, j'ai vécu en tant que femme entre 1688 et 1735. Entre 1688 et 1735. J'ai été femme. J'ai vécu en tant que femme entre 1688 et 1735. Puis des fois homme, des fois femme. J'ai rencontré Louis VI. J'ai servi dans la service de police de ville de Montréal. J'étais prêtresse dans l'ancien Rome. Je servais dans l'armée de l'ancienne Égypte, de Rome, Babylone, jusqu'à maintenant. Puis, bien sûr, aujourd'hui, on parle de la géopolitique. On va rentrer dans un royaume de la géopolitique avec du rock'n'roll toujours. C'est la canicule, je vois l'ombre, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Comme Québécois, vous dansez-vous, vous hydratez de boire de l'eau quand il fait chaud. Fait que c'est mon intérêt spécial, là. Aussi connu comme obsessif, mais ça ne rend pas justice pour moi d'utiliser le mot obsessif, parce que ça se manifeste pas comme ça chez nous, chez les Asperger, ces intérêts de la manière obsessive que chez vous, les neurotypiques, les 99% de la population, vous êtes neurotypiques. Fait qu'on ne peut pas vraiment utiliser les mêmes mots vis-à-vis ces croyances. Fait que bien sûr, dans cette propre estimation, bien sûr que ça sert bien sûr de faire de la croyance ou qu'on aille à croire dans ce point où qu'on est rendu, bien sûr, à faire et à vivre en tant qu'Asperger. Il faut toujours que je bâtis des ponts qu'on construit puis qu'on les bâtit ensemble. Les ponts, des fois, ils peuvent être des petits ponts, des moyens, des larges ou des extra larges. Mais dans ces 4 catégories, là, c'est comme vous allez dans ces 4 catégories, c'est quand que vous commandez Quand que vous commandez, bien sûr, quand que vous commandez, bien sûr, vous faites une commande, vous commandez un café, vous commandez un café, bien sûr, vous commandez un café, vous commandez un café, un petit café, un café moyen, un café large ou un café extra large. Fait que quand vous commandez dans ce café-là, dans ce style, un petit café, un café moyen, un large ou un extra large, c'est sûr que dans ces 4 catégories, ben, on a des sous-catégories quand même, hein, dans ces 4 catégories. Mais je dis qu'on doit bâtir ces ponts-là de cette manière. C'est la même pour faire pour dire, bien sûr, que dans cette catégorie-là, dans ces 4 catégories, c'est comme quand vous commandez quelque chose, là, soit bien sûr du café ou des frites, là, un restaurant. Là. Mais on doit bâtir les ponts, on n'a pas le choix, parce que moi, j'ai pas de relation antagoniste envers vous. Fait que je dois toujours bâtir les ponts là, envers vous. Là, puis on doit bâtir les ponts, là, puis on doit être de cette manière, bien sûr, pour l'être. Puis on doit bâtir ces ponts-là, veut pas. Des petits ponts, des ponts moyens, des ponts larges, des ponts extra larges. Fait que dans ce sens où on doit les bâtir, c'est sûr que ces ponts-là peuvent varier, tu sais. Peut avoir une variation, tu sais, de la grandeur. Fait que ils peuvent être petits, moyens, larges ou extra larges. Fait que ces 4 catégories, c'est sûr qu'on peut les bâtir d'une autre manière, mais c'est sûr qu'il peut y avoir d'autres catégories dans ceux-là. Mais en général, puis d'une manière générale, c'est sûr que c'est ça qu'il faut qu'on fasse. Bâtir ces ponts-là de cette manière. Qu'ils soient petits, qu'ils soient larges, qu'ils soient extra larges, qu'ils soient super larges. Comprenez? Fait que de cette manière-là, mais qu'ils soient petits, moyens, larges ou extra larges, on doit les bâtir. Vous comprenez? Veut pas, on doit les bâtir. Fait que qu'on les bâtit de cette manière, bien sûr, ou d'autres, on doit bâtir dans ces 4 catégories majeures. Petit, moyen, grand ou extra large. Mais ça dépend d'individu par individu. Là, je ne vais pas continuer sur l'Asperger, je vais parler de la géopolitique. C'est ça que je connais le plus. À part le rock'n'roll de l'entraînement physique, là, c'est ça, c'est mes intérêts au quotidien. Puis qu'est-ce que je fais en tant qu'artiste, athlète, philosophe, analyste intéressé en géopolitique. En 2019, j'ai prévu la situation qui se déroule en ce moment, en octobre 2017, 2019. Juste avant la COVID, j'ai prévu qu'il y aura, qui viendra, tu sais, la tempête qu'on vit maintenant. J'ai prévu ça en 2019, en octobre, en novembre. J'ai prévu qu'il y aura une conflagration internationale en octobre 2019. Vous avez bien entendu celle-là. Pas juste entendu, mais j'ai même la preuve pour vous démontrer que j'ai la vidéo en ligne, quand bien sûr j'ai discuté qu'il y aura une conflagration internationale, bien sûr qui viendra dans les prochaines années. C'est sûr que ça, bien sûr, on rentre un peu dans le temps en 2019. En octobre-novembre 2019, j'ai prévu qu'il y aura une conflagration internationale basée sur plusieurs paramètres. Ces paramètres-là étaient un petit peu académiques, un peu de manière intellectuelle, mais c'est sûr que c'était des paramètres vis-à-vis de l'analyse de la géopolitique. Puis comme je dis toujours qu'ici, au Québec, au Canada, on a fait ce que j'appelle le grand compromis linguistique. Parce que nous, si on y pense de même, on constitue un collectif de civilisation, parce qu'on est un collectif de civilisation nord-américain. Puis au Québec, c'est sûr qu'on a fait le grand compromis du français. Je dois le faire moi-même, tu sais. En tant que citoyen, je dois faire un effort, puis j'encourage toujours les gens qui le font. Mais c'est sûr que moi, si je le fais pas en tant qu'individu, comprenez, si moi je le fais pas vis-à-vis en tant qu'individu, on va pas le faire, bien sûr. Fait qu'on le fera pas, tu sais, faites attention. On le fera pas ensemble. Faites attention quand vous passez, bien sûr, vous passez sur la circulation, hein, puis ça circule de même, mais faut que vous... Je m'inquiétais un peu pour mon concitoyen, mon cousin un peu, parce que des fois, tu sais, on vit des temps difficiles, fait qu'il y a des choses qui se passent, tu sais, fait que bien sûr, il y a des choses qui se passent, bien sûr, pour le faire, bien sûr, dans cela, puis tu sais, des fois, je m'inquiétais aussi pour mon concitoyen, là. Parce que je dois être le plus que je puisse l'être, c'est bien sûr un bon samaritain, bien sûr, dans ce point de compromis pour l'être, bien sûr, dans ce point d'avoir une interaction, bien sûr, ou que je le vis moi-même, mais c'est comme vous êtes de ma famille, je veux pas, mais c'est sûr que je m'inquiétais un peu pour la bicyclette, là, mais c'est sûr quand on entend le son, l'alarme, il faut qu'on ralentit. Bon, du retour à la géopolitique. J'ai prévu qu'est-ce qui se passe maintenant. Mais comme je dis souvent, tu sais, si moi qu'est-ce que j'ai prévu? J'ai pas prévu, là, qu'il y aura... Celle-là, il faut que je dise que j'ai pas prévu qu'il y a que nous, avec les États-Unis, qu'il y aura une détérioration des relations avec les États-Unis. Ça, j'ai pas prévu, par exemple. Fait que ça, c'est nouveau pour moi aussi. La détérioration de nos relations avec les États-Unis. Ça, c'est nouveau pour moi aussi. La détérioration des relations avec les États-Unis, c'est nouveau pour moi aussi. Vous comprenez? C'est nouveau. Je dois le prendre en considération. Celle-là, je ne l'ai pas prévu. Mais j'avais prévu qu'il y aura une conflagration internationale. C'est pour ça que mes analyses, mes théories, la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, c'est la théorie qui va nous sauver du point de vue économique où on est rendu. Mais j'ai prévu en grosse partie qu'à cause des conflits qui n'ont pas été réglés du 20e siècle, que ces conflits-là vont reprendre au 21e siècle aujourd'hui. Ça, c'était en 2019, en octobre. Puis j'ai la preuve, j'ai les vidéos chez nous. J'ai les vidéos discutant, bien sûr, qu'il y aura. Puis j'ai même créé un entraînement physique qui ne requiert aucun équipement, que moi-même j'ai constitué, j'ai fait moi-même plus que 372 sessions. Plus que 360. Fait que là, j'avais prévu celle-là. Qu'est-ce qui se passe maintenant? Basé sur plusieurs paramètres d'analyse en géopolitique, un peu académique, un peu intellectuel, cosmopolite, sophistiqué, philosophe, mais en général, j'ai prévu qu'à cause que des conflits qui n'ont pas été capables d'avoir de résolution du 20e siècle, que ces conflits-là vont reprendre dans le 21e siècle. Puis l'Ukraine puis la Russie, c'est un conflit qui date du 20e siècle, de la guerre froide qui a duré environ 45 ans. Il y en a qui disent 46 ans, là. Il y en a qui disent 45, il y en a qui disent, comme moi, je dis 44 ans et 9 mois. Entre mars 1947 et décembre 1991. Fait que c'est sûr que dans ces paramètres-là, ça reste quand même une distance d'années, mais c'est quand même mensuel. Fait que de cette manière, bien sûr qu'on puisse le diriger puis qu'on puisse le dire, c'est sûr que ces conflits-là, ils ont repris du 20e siècle, là, ils ont repris pour être dans le 21e siècle. Vous comprenez? Fait que c'est ça qui arrive. Vous comprenez? C'est des conflits, bien sûr, qui ont recommencé. C'est des conflits du 20e siècle là, qui ont recommencé. C'est des conflits qui ont recommencé. C'est des conflits qui ont recommencé. Ces conflits-là, bien sûr, ils ont recommencé du 20e siècle, ils ont recommencé dans le 21e siècle. Du 20e siècle. Du 20e siècle. Fait qu'ils ont recommencé dans ce... Maintenant, ils ont recommencé. Vous comprenez? C'est ça qui arrive à cause de ces tensions du 20e siècle qui n'ont pas été capables d'avoir de résolution. Ils n'ont pas été capables de résoudre ces problèmes-là depuis le 20e siècle. Et regardez, c'est la Lune. Ils n'ont pas été capables. Il n'y a pas eu de résolution, bien sûr, complète. Fait qu'il n'y a pas eu de résolution, bien sûr. C'est sûr que maintenant, bien sûr, on est rendu ici. Puis la détérioration des relations avec les États-Unis, celle-là, je ne l'ai pas prévue, par exemple. Ça, il faut que je sois honnête moi-même, je n'ai pas prévu celle-là. Vous comprenez? Fait que c'est pour ça que ma TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, il faut faire l'implémentation aussitôt pour la création de l'unité d'échange universelle. Pour la création de l'unité d'échange universelle. Bien sûr, pour la création de l'unité d'échange universelle. Pour la création l'unité d'échange universel, prêter allégeance légion, puis qu'on fusionne de ma manière avec les États-Unis de manière un peu plus centriste, impériale républicaine, pour créer bien sûr l'unité d'échange universel, U point unité, point échange ou point universel, par toute la dette publique-privée qui existe, en faisant, ramassant ensemble, puis en faisant la création d'une monnaie commune, comme qu'ils ont fait en Europe. C'est sûr qu'il faut qu'on le fasse. On n'a pas le choix, mais fait que soutenez ma vision, mon rêve, qui est fondamentalement un appel à un partenariat public-privé pour fusionner le Canada et les États-Unis dans un complexe impérial républicain démocrate pour les 10, les 50 et les 63 dans la Constitution des 63. Ça, c'est la Lune. Prêter allégeance à les gens, vous êtes famille. La création de l'unité d'échange universel via la TRD, théorie de la refusion, la théorie de la refusion de la dette. Il faut qu'on fasse l'implémentation ensemble. Prêter allégeance les gens.